Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our talk on small ship polar voyages with Discover the World and Arctic AE expeditions, where we're going to be exploring the magical, the mesmerizing Svalbard archipelago in the high Arctic. My name is William Gray. I'm a travel writer and photographer. I've got a passion for wildlife and wild places, and I've been lucky enough to sail up the breathtaking coast of Spitsbergen. And it's my pleasure to be hosting the webinar this evening, which I hope you'll find both inspiring and informative for planning your own polar voyage. Now, in a moment, I'm going to be giving a short overview of expedition voyaging with Discover the World. But first, I'm delighted to welcome our special guests for this evening. I'm just going to share my screen. First, we have Jamie Lafferty, an award-winning travel writer and photographer, and author from Glasgow. Looking at the Chilean, I think he's going to be warmer this evening for us. His work on Svalbard has been featured in a whole load of publications, including National Geographic Traveller, the Financial Times, and many others. Jamie has voyaged to Antarctica 8 times, and he tells me he spent a week in Svalbard while a horror film was being shot, which I'm quite intrigued to hear about later, Jamie. And he has stories to tell from everywhere in between. He'll be returning to Svalbard 3 times in 2025. Lucky him. Next, we have Andy Tait from AE Expeditions. Now, Andy has worked in a variety of roles in hospitality and tourism, from managing restaurants all around the world to spending over a decade in luxury travel agencies and tour operators in the UK. One of Andy's core values is sustainability, which is one of the things that first attracted him to work for AE Expeditions. In addition to helping Aurora become the global leader in sustainable expedition cruising, Andy continues to work within the wider travel industry to share and develop ways to improve sustainability across the industry. So again, that's an important theme, which I'm sure we'll be touching on later this evening. Now we're going to round off the evening with a question and answer session, where we'll be joined by Jo Sehgal from Discover the World. Jo joined Discover the World over 2 decades ago and is now their senior tailor-made travel specialist with a wealth of experience and first-hand knowledge of polar voyages and small ship cruising. Now, her travels have taken her, well, pretty much everywhere, but Iceland, Spitsbergen, of course, Antarctica, Alaska, everywhere in between probably has featured in her globe-trotting exploits. So we'll catch up with Jo later on. So a very warm welcome to our guests. We'll catch up with you a little later, as I say, when I'll also be sharing details of some exciting booking offers available for Arctic and AE expeditions. So here we are, Svalbard, and its main island, Spitsbergen. What a truly extraordinary place this is. Riven by deep fjords with these huge glaciers stretching below those ice-chiseled peaks. It really is the gem of the Arctic. This, of course, is the kingdom of the polar bear, but you'll also be on the lookout for a whole range of wildlife, such as Arctic foxes, walrus, bearded seal, and a plethora of seabirds. Discover the World partners with the best, most environmentally responsible small ship operators, such as AE Expeditions here with their fabulous Greg Mortimer ship in the background. And that's all to give you a really intimate, authentic experience of the high Arctic. Now, they've been offering voyages to the polar region since 1984, and they launched their first holiday program under the banner of Arctic Experience. Their polar pedigree is reflected in their logo, which features the Arctic Tern, renowned, of course, for its epic trans-global expedition, but it's a migration, of course, between Antarctica and the Arctic, a journey, a round trip of some 22,000 miles. So with all these decades of experience behind them, Discover the World have developed and refined an unrivaled collection of polar voyages. Traveling on ships with never more than around 200 fellow passengers, you'll slip through sublime scenery using zodiacs for shore excursions and wildlife watching. Working with AE Expeditions, Discover the World offers 3 voyages in Svalbard, just going to give you a short overview of. Here's West Spitsbergen Explorer, one of the shorter voyages, which focuses just on the west and the northwest coasts of Spitsbergen. Perfect for first timer perhaps, or someone who's looking for a shorter length voyage. Great value and offering plenty of opportunities for shore landings and wildlife watching. Next is around Spitsbergen, which is really, I guess, the flagship voyage. It's where you will attempt, ice and weather conditions permitting, to circumnavigate Spitsbergen. And it's perfect if you want that really in-depth experience of Svalbard with a lot more time perhaps to search out the wildlife. And then finally, we have Spitsbergen to East Greenland, which includes an exploration of Scoresby Sund, which is this huge, in fact, the world's largest fjord system on the east coast of Greenland. It also visits Iceland as well. As you can see, there's loads more information about all of these voyages on Discover the World's website, including, actually, I just mentioned their brand new North Spitsbergen Explorer voyage, which has just been launched last week, which aims to venture into the Arctic ice north of Spitsbergen. So as an independent tour operator with travel specialists like Jo, who have first-hand experience of the ships and destinations, Discover the World really are well placed to offer you that personalized, tailor-made, unbiased advice on the polar voyage that suits you best. They can pretty much match the best experience to each individual. They'll help you navigate the range of cabins available and help you plan that once-in-a-lifetime voyage. And by booking with them, of course, you'll receive complete financial security, no surcharges, and emergency backup 24 hours a day. So now the main event for this evening. Discover the World are proud to have partnered with AE Expeditions for many, many years, offering voyages to the polar regions. In a moment, Andy from AE Expeditions will give us an overview, describing some of their fantastic ships, their sustainability ethos and other aspects of their work. But first, I'm very pleased to hand over to veteran polar voyager, writer and photographer, Jamie Lafferty. Jamie, over to you.
Hello, how are you doing? Let me just share my screen with you here. I'm going to talk to you first about a couple of atypical trips that I had to Svalbard, and then talk to you a bit more about what it's like to visit on one of the bigger ships. So this first trip was actually the most recent one that I did as a travel writer, which is my main job when I'm not on the ships as a photography guide. So this was actually on a sailing ship, which is lovely and romantic and everything, but not particularly comfortable, and not very fast either. So we visited the west of the archipelago, and we saw a lot of the things that you would hope to see on that trip, on a trip to Svalbard. So, you know, big, huge glaciers, interesting fjords, and a lot of wildlife. And so that was a couple of years ago now. But I think the downside with it, you know, for all we had the romance of hearing the sails and seeing it unfurled and everything, we just couldn't actually get very far very quickly. So what I would recommend instead is having a look around where you can where you've got much more flexibility on a big ship. But if you wanted to see some more of the landscape, it's a really, really funny place. It's a strange in many, many ways, including the fact that it is technically Norwegian, but has very interesting laws about immigration and land use. So it anyone can go to Svalbard to live, unlike mainland Norway. So if you've got the means to support yourself or you've got a job offer, you can move there. So when you arrive to Longyearbyen, the only city, not city, it's a town really, in the whole place, there's only about 2,000 people living there, but there's something like 40 nationalities because people have come from all over the world to get to the top of the world to live in Svalbard. Before the sort of modern era of tourism, and it was a lot of mining happened up there, and There were several originally Swedish and then latterly Russian settlements, including one called Pyramiden, which has now been abandoned. It was abandoned in the 90s. And I went there for National Geographic to write this story in 2019, I think it was. And yeah, it was a really, really eerie place because it wasn't abandoned over time. It all happened quite quickly, which gave the entire town this kind of freaky feeling. And I then latterly sold a picture essay to the New York Times about the same place. And it was funny because I had heard about it ahead of going and was excited to see it and to get around. But I was told that in order to explore properly, I would need to take some whiskey as a bribe for the local caretaker in order to be shown around properly. And it turned out that that wasn't really necessary because this abandoned town has one building, one functional building, which is the hotel. And I expected to be the only guest there, but there was actually a small film crew there. So, and they were shooting a horror film, as was mentioned earlier on. And it was a very eerie experience to be in an abandoned town anyway, an abandoned Soviet mining town at the top of the world. But then to be like, you go to lunch, there's only one restaurant, obviously, and looking to the side of me, and there's a guy with like a hideous face wound with all the makeup from the horror film was very, very strange as well. And while it was fascinating for me anyway, the film crew got increasingly frustrated because they had picked the place based on the fact that it was abandoned, of course, but also on the fact that the producer had been there several years before trying to shoot a nature documentary because Svalbard ultimately is this phenomenal Arctic nature extravaganza. And every day when he was trying to do the documentary, the fog would come in. And so he thought, I'll go back in a few years' time, shoot a horror film, and this reliable fog will be like a homemade special effect. And of course, the 4 days that I was there with them, it was nothing but sunny. So we were very frustrated. They shot a lot of interior stuff. It's a very curious place, and inevitably, when you go to Svalbard, before you get on a ship, you have to fly into Longyearbyen, which is the main town. And if you've got some extra time there, and I would recommend that you take some extra time there, you can go out to visit Pyramiden, which is the town that I was in. And there's another very small Russian settlement called Barentsburg, but almost everyone lives in Longyearbyen, which is not the prettiest town, but it's a really interesting place. And so I would say, however you're going to get around the archipelago, I would say that you should add a couple of days in Longyearbyen. The town limits are quite clearly defined by polar bears, basically. There's a point you can't go past without a gun, in case there are polar bears. We'll talk more about polar bears shortly. So in case you don't know where it is or what it is, Svalbard is that archipelago up the very top of the world there. So very, very far inside the Arctic Circle. If you visit any time in June or July, the sun won't set at all. And basically anything that's in Svalbard is the northernmost iteration of that thing. So for example, in Pyramiden, I said to my guide, is this where the northernmost grand piano is? And he said, yes. And he showed me it. And then he said, oh, no, sorry, there's another one in the other building. And so that's the northernmost one by about 20 meters or so. So anything that's there at all, whether it's a bar, whether it's a hotel, a restaurant, or your ship, will be the northernmost thing at that time, almost certainly, because it's very, very extremely far north. So if you're going from the UK, typically you fly to Oslo, and then you either fly direct up to Longyearbyen, or you connect in Tromsø, which is right at the top of mainland Norway. So the time difference isn't all that dramatic because you're not moving that far east, but the latitude certainly is, and so you need to get used to endless daylight. So as a photographer, that's a pretty handy thing. Although you don't, especially in June, you don't really get like a golden hour because it's just the sun is just sort of spinning high in the sky. on those clear days. So it's a very particular and peculiar place, but it has lots of rewards. And as you can see, it's quite isolated there. I think it's only about 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole. And because it's an isolated landmass, there's a lot of the wildlife either migrates there or just stays there. So there's quite a lot of land mammals, as well as hundreds of thousands of migratory birds as well. In terms of how it looks, we'll get a bit of an idea. Here's one of the ships. I think this one is the Greg Mortimer. And this was a foggy day. The captain was not enjoying how the fog kept rolling in and out. So it took us a while to get going, but very sort of eerie and beautiful at the same time. This is a much clearer day, give you a better idea of how it all looks. These huge epic landscapes with very small looking people and ships in front of them. The Zodiac's there. If you don't know what a Zodiac is, it's a sort of motorized dinghy that are incredibly hard wearing, and they're used for polar exploration in the north and south, as in the Arctic and the Antarctic. They can take a real beating. They were designed by the SBS, so they're meant to be knocked around a bit. I can drive one now, but I was quite nervous about it initially until my expedition leader told me they're not made of glass, don't worry about it. I think I more or less believe him now. Here you get a good idea of how it looks for passengers with their life jackets on in the Zodiac. So the Zodiacs we would use either to take people from the ship directly to the shore if we're doing a landing, or simply for cruising around on the Zodiacs. So they tend to have, but this has only got, I think, 6 people in it, but you have, you can fit about 10 people in quite comfortably. If we're running a photo Zodiac, so specifically going out to shoot the best photos we can, we try to only put 8 people in so that they can move around with their big lenses and everything. And yeah, they're surprisingly comfortable. If you're in there for a couple of hours, you might get a little bit cold, so you'll get told to wrap up warm and everything. But they are amazing little machines, and they take you to some of the most extraordinary places on Earth. In terms of how the landscape looks, this is another sort of misty morning. I give you a good idea of what the high Arctic looks like. You're very, very far above the tree line. And when you get these sunny days, and they do happen, it's extraordinary to see like the visibilities. Of course, there's no pollution up there, so you have fabulous visibility, great for photos and wildlife spotting as well. This is, I suppose, what looking at where it is on the map, you would imagine that all of it is like this all of the time. So these great glaciers running into what they call fast ice, which is this frozen surface in the bay, and then a small group of guillemots there flying across the sky. But yeah, it is, I mean, you visit in summer on the ships. You can only really visit in summer because in winter the ocean freezes, and you would go from being fully light all the time to being fully dark all the time, which would not be a great way to spot wildlife. And so yeah, there in summer it can get cold, but you normally would be quite rare for it to be below freezing. Of course, you get quite a lot of cold radiating off of these enormous glaciers as well. So it's a very special place for that kind of thing. However, it's not all ice. It is actually quite a lush place in places as well. This is a lot of bog cotton. And so because you have these sort of pasture and fields, you also have reindeer were taken up there when people first visited. It was only discovered about 400 years ago, and only really visited heavily about 200 years ago during the days of the whaling industry. But people took reindeers up with them, and so the reindeer on Svalbard are quite abundant. In fact, in Longyearbyen, sometimes you'll see them just walking down the high street. But when you spot them out in the wild, it's quite exciting. They've adapted a little bit for life in the high Arctic. This is perhaps a more common landscape. These beautiful but quite stark peaks. Yeah, there's a lot of mosses and lichens. You need to be a bit careful when you're walking around. But walking around is the idea. That's whenever we can, as guides, we want to get people out and about and stretching their legs. We often get accused of oversupplying the food on the ships, which always makes me laugh because two of the meals are buffets. So I think we have to share the blame for that one. But yeah, the hiking is always guide led, and so in the Arctic, I don't know, perhaps some of you have been to Antarctica. It's very different in Svalbard and all throughout the Arctic region. I mean, I guess the expression is that it's a polar opposite experience. And the main reason, of course, is polar bears. Again, we'll get to them. But every guide that leads hikes around Svalbard will be armed. And that is for everyone's protection. In the 30 years or so that Aurora have been operating in the polar regions, they've never had to fire a gun. So it's what the main job of the guides is actually scouting. It's not hunting or anything. It's not even really personal defense or the defense of the guests. We endeavor all the time from the ship and on shore to spot any problems long before they happen. So all that said, the landscapes are sensational, and it's particularly rewarding to be able to hike amongst them, take photos, whether that's landscape photos or photos of the moss. Here's one of my friends scouting again for bears, and this is a very common sight. There's two sort of ways that you do a landing in Svalbard. You either set up a perimeter of armed guides around, and then you can walk around freely within the perimeter, or you follow a guide. You split into groups and follow guides as they lead across the landscape. But this is a job that makes me glad I'm the photographer, is that I get to move around all the time. I don't have to stand there sentinel with my gun, but it's a vital part of safety for the animals and for all the guests as well. In terms of wildlife that aren't bears, again, we'll get to the bears. These guys, of course, are much beloved by everyone. The clowns, the penguins of the north, the puffin. Fun fact, group of puffins is called a circus, and you can see why. They're not massively abundant in Svalbard, not like they are in Scotland or in Iceland, perhaps, but there are healthy populations of them. And where they nest is, of course, often visited by ships because it's very hard not to like puffins. But they're also, famously, puffins are a lot smaller than you believe before you see them. But the whales, which are absolutely everywhere in summer, are certainly, to have one of those swim under your Zodiac is a real big experience in more ways than one. They're not the only cetaceans that you'll find in Svalbard. You will, there's also beluga, not narwhals, but there are beluga, which are the all white, sort of smiling, small whales. You do get different types of dolphin occasionally as well as the humpback whales, which are the most abundant. You might see minke whales. Occasionally you'll see fin whales. If you're very lucky, you'll see blue whales. If you're even luckier, you might see orca. But it's a very abundant, very untouched place. So wildlife of all sizes is drawn there, much like the tourists are to witness them in these spectacular environments. I got into trouble for this picture, not because I did anything wrong, but because I had dropped people off on shore and then was just waiting in my Zodiac, and the whale came to me and swam underneath my Zodiac and then raised the tail, and nobody else was there. Yeah, people were flatly jealous of that experience, and so they should have been, because it was wonderful. I had, a very humbling experience to hear and to see the sort of enormousness of the whale passing underneath the little boat I was in. These guys also very popular. This is an Arctic fox in his summer coat. So they go from being all white, pure white in winter to this sort of mottled, semi-camouflaged color. They're very cute. Some of their behavior is quite hard to defend. They make their money by robbing nests, basically, whether that's of eggs or chicks. They tend to stash quite a lot of their food for winter as well, when times get much harder. but they have bags of personality, the Arctic fox, and some of them are really curious. Sometimes on landings they'll come over to us. Other times they'll be very kind of nervous, depending on where they are, and of course what other wildlife is that they know is around. You'll often see them getting a hard time if they go near a seabird colony, and yeah, but they're up to no good most of the time. I personally like them a lot, but yeah. Maybe my favorite animal in Svalbard is the walrus. They are absolutely spectacular. The second largest pinniped in the world, and kind of just they don't smell great, I would say that much, but they are very, very funny looking, and their tiny eyes, their big mustaches, like their huge tusks. The whole thing is an amazing thing to see. And then they, as you can see in the background there, they amass in these huge stinking colonies, and the noises that they make and everything are just incredible. They are a group of walrus is an ugliness of walrus, which seems a bit harsh, but perhaps not entirely inaccurate at the same time. Yeah, there are 3 or 4 walrus are so huge and not the most agile creatures on land. And so there are sort of known what they call haul outs, specific places, low-lying beaches that are very well suited to these guys. And so they're often visited to the same places because you can reliably see them. Of course, it's wildlife, like everything. While it's very abundant, it's still a bit unpredictable. You can occasionally get to the hollow and it will be empty because all of these massive, magnificent creatures are off feeding. So, but there's a walrus are one of the creatures you would certainly hope to see, especially if you're on a slightly longer trip in Svalbard. They don't really have much to worry about. Only really the polar bears. All of these animals would have been hunted even 100 years ago. All of them are now protected, but the walrus is like armored almost, has such a thick layer of blubber that even polar bears can't really get into it with much ease. You'll sometimes see bears scavenging dead walrus, but they won't really hunt them because the walrus is too well, it's got those huge tusks. They're rarely alone, and they're not really to be messed with. But they do love posing. They really do love posing. Yeah, they in the zodiacs we have to be a little bit careful of them. We have to move away when we see them. Those big tusks can be dangerous, so you have to respect the animals, of course. But with big lenses and everything, you can still get these quite nice portraits of them. And they're not widely spread walrus. They're properly Arctic animals, and you wouldn't see them in many places around the world. So it's very special when you do. And then again, this is an animal that I absolutely love. There are hundreds of thousands of these Brunix guillemots in Svalbard, and there are so many that it kind of beggars belief, really. Again, some people who are watching this may have been to Antarctica or at least seen pictures of Antarctica and seen these gigantic colonies of penguins in South Georgia or on the Antarctic Peninsula, and that's fantastic, unbelievable thing to see, but they don't fly. You have aggregations of similar sizes with these Brunix guillemots, and they're flying at the same time. So to be near one of their colonies is a kind of magic thing. They're not the greatest flyers, I would say. They're probably only a couple of evolutionary steps away from becoming like penguins, really, and switching to being marine animals completely. They crash land every time, and they take off from these cliffs by essentially falling off the side. But and they've got a very high frequency of wing flaps because it doesn't really seem like they should be in the air. But that's the sort of scene you can see in some places, and so obviously their system is working. I think they're the second deepest diving bird after the emperor penguin, so they are remarkable little creatures. And this spot here is again a sort of classic stop. It's so rewarding to visit these cliffs at Alkafjellet. It's really a majestic place. The numbers vary, but it's thought to be about 150,000 of these guillemots nesting in the high cliffs. Thankfully, they only defecate when they're roosting. They don't do it in the air, otherwise it'd be a lot less fun to visit. But they are, yeah, it's really to see that, to be at the bottom of those cliffs is one of the great wildlife experiences I've had anywhere in the world. And as a travel writer who's been doing it for 15 years or more, I've had, and with a speciality in wildlife as well, I've had quite a few amazing experiences in different parts of the world. But Alkufjell is really, really breathtaking. And there's mostly these guys, the guillemots, but there's other birds preying on them. And then there's occasionally an Arctic fox up to no good in the cliffs. But the sight and sound of the whole thing is absolutely fabulous. All of which kind of brings me to my least favorite animal in the Arctic, which is the polar bear. And I'll explain why, or endeavor to explain why. I was here in this scene that you can see here in July last summer, and we had been going for quite a while on the ship. It was a long trip. So we'd visited East Greenland first, and then we transited over to Svalbard. And we were 16 days in, and this was the 16th day, and we hadn't seen a polar bear yet. And we had this experience, and I was so excited. And then one of the first questions we got when we got back to the ship is, "But when are we going to see the polar bears?" And I understand, they're one of the world's largest land predator. They are majestic, but they do kind of ruin everything, and I'll explain why. They kind of ruin it, and then they turn up and look like that, and it's hard to hold a grudge, I suppose. But animals in the north, in the high north, have all evolved to fear the polar bear. They have to be cautious of it, both in the water, but in particular on land. And so the intimacy that you can get with wildlife in some places that don't have a large land predator, like Antarctica or like the Galapagos Islands, is because the animals can be relaxed on land. And thanks to the polar bear, nothing can be relaxed because the polar bear will try to eat absolutely everything, absolutely everything. So the wildlife can't relax, and we as visitors can't relax entirely either. But to see them is it's an unforgettable thing. This massive lumbering creature, which has rapidly evolved from a grizzly bear to be this highly specialized predator that dominates the whole of the Arctic. Really, the whole Arctic world is ruled by these guys, and in Svalbard, the population is thought to be steadily increasing. And of course, climate change makes every animal's life, well, not every animal, a lot of animals' lives more difficult, and it's also putting pressure on the polar bear. But polar bears are, as well as being massively deadly and dangerous, they're also very smart and can seem to be able to think quite laterally and come up with alternative plans, basically. Their favorite food is a ring seal. So a ring seal is a fairly small seal, which is, if you're lucky, you can spot them. They tend to be very shy, mostly, again, because polar bears are trying to eat them all the time. But what the polar bear, when the weather's cold enough, what they like to do is hide over a breathing hole, wait for a ring seal to pop up to breathe, and then grab it and take it away. And as ice decreases in Svalbard and everywhere, the polar bears are finding fewer ring seals, but they're coming up with alternatives instead. So one of the things they've started doing is raiding seabird colonies. Incidentally, there is one animal that's not afraid of the polar bear, and that's the Arctic tern. The Arctic terns, if you visit Svalbard, will blow your mind in how aggressive they are to everything else. This BBC got quite famous footage a few years ago of a polar bear mistakenly trying to go and collect some Arctic tern eggs and being chased away with a bleeding scalp because the Arctic terns dive bombed him so much. But generally, they can obviously do what they want. It takes a lot to scare them off. They've also started hunting reindeer, those endemic reindeer that I mentioned earlier on. So the polar bears are kind of looking after themselves for the time being on Svalbard. Of course, globally, the picture might not be as rosy, but on Svalbard, they think that there's somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 bears, which means that there's more bears on the archipelago than there are people.
So that's a good thing. And although it's the population is kind of not trapped but contained within Svalbard, it's amazing that they're finding enough food to continue to grow and thrive in what is arguably the most hostile environment on Earth. If you're lucky, you might find they've got absolutely fabulous sense of smell. So when there's like a dead animal, let's say it's a walrus, and it's on the beach, after a couple of days, if the walrus smells bad when it's alive, let me reassure you, it smells significantly worse when dead. And the polar bears will pick up on that from miles and miles away, and then they tend to congregate where there's one of these animals. And if there's enough food, there's not that much aggression between the bears. This is actually a fairly friendly greeting between them. Yeah, how close you can get it's changing a little bit in Svalbard, but they've realized how precious their bear population is and how healthy it is, and so they're taking as many measures as you can to protect them. The bears occasionally wander into the towns and into the settlements as well, but usually then what happens is they're tranquilized, put in a net, and then they wake up several miles from the settlement. There was quite a funny story about maybe I think 6 or 7 years ago. There's a remote place called Isefjord, or Eastfjord Radio, sorry. Eastfjord Radio is like an old radio station that's been changed into a hotel, which you need to take a speedboat to reach in summer. And its pantry got raided by a polar bear, which broke in through a window and then just ate everything, all the stores that were there to last the hotel for the whole summer. Apparently, it particularly went crazy for chocolate and red wine, and I find that very funny. The idea of this, golden white bear spattered with chocolate and red wine, trying to deny that he had anything to do with it. The hotel had to call Longyearbyen to try and remove the bear, and as the helicopter came down, the bear tried to get out of the window, the same window that it came in, but it was now too fat to get back out the way that it had come in because it had eaten everything from the hotel stores. Finally, it panicked, broke the window, and escaped and ran away. So it was a happy ending for the bear. Less happy for the people who had to clean up after the bear. But yeah, occasionally you'll see them in the water as well. Their Latin name means Ursus maritimus, which literally means sea bear. So their absolutely vast paws are kind of webbed. So that when you see them in the water, it's easy to think that's very uncomfortable for the bear. Perhaps it's cold, perhaps it's tired, but actually they're fully adapted to being in the water, and they can swim gigantic distances. Yeah, I mean, that's almost it from me. I think the thing about bears in Svalbard is that they're hugely abundant, and that's great. But if you remove them from Svalbard, I'm not suggesting that you should. If they weren't there, there would still be an unbelievable array of wildlife to go and see. They're not the be all and end all of wildlife in that part of the region. Often you'll see them, they'll just be very small in the distance, and even that's a thrilling experience, something really fascinating. But the way that the bears dominate everyone's mind isn't that helpful. And yet it's such a special place with so much biodiversity. Yeah, of all of the Arctic, and I've traveled extensively, it's definitely my favorite place. That combination of scenery plus the wildlife is really like nowhere else. Very easy to recommend it. That's it from me just now.
Thanks, Andy. That was, sorry, Jamie. Andy's next, of course. That was fascinating. What a lovely introduction to a beautiful part of the world, and some fantastic photographs too. Yeah, I want to go back this summer, definitely. I'm now going to pass over to Andy from Aurora Expeditions, who's now going to tell us a little bit more about this great place. So Andy, over to you.
Lovely. Thank you. Let me just share my screen as well to tell you a bit more about who we are. There we go. Lovely. So to give a bit more information on who we are at AE Expeditions and what we can offer in Svalbard for you and your clients. So as a company, we love to work on the idea of small ships and big adventures is very much our core atmosphere when traveling to the polar regions. Who we are as a company? Well, we've been operating now for 34 years in the polar regions. We are original signatories of the IATO Treaty, which is the setup for protective travel in Antarctica. And we also are one of the leading members for AACO as well, which is the same aspect for the Arctic. So although expedition travel is something that I think has become a big buzzword in the wider travel industry over the last few years, it's something that we've been operating for an incredibly long time now, and very much something that was part of who we are and that level of expertise that we offer. We are an Australian owned and operated company. So when you do come on board with us, it's very much an Australian feel on board. It's all first name basis. We want all of our clients and guests be mates on board, get to know one another and become friendly with the other passengers. And it's also very relaxed and casual. So t-shirt and jeans on board. We're not a upscale fancy dining. We want people to come on board and make friends and be relaxed and treat this as your home. In terms of clients who do come on board, our biggest market is actually Australia. So about 40% of our clients are Australian. And then second place is tied between Brits and Americans at 25% each, with the final 10% coming from Europeans. So a really nice international crowd. I'm sure we can all agree that Australians are some of the easiest, most relaxed people to get on with. And so therefore, when you do travel with us, it is a very fun, relaxing environment. And as I say, you become family and friends with your other expeditioners very quickly. We were founded by this gentleman who you can see on the right of my screen called Greg Mortimer. I appreciate for the UK, he doesn't mean a lot to us, but in Australia, he's a very, very big deal. He's the first Australian to climb Mount Everest and K2 mountains, and was also the first human known to climb Mount Minto, which is one of the top 5 peaks in Antarctica as well. So Greg is very much set the company up by the idea of adventure, exploration, and discovery. And to this day, we still operate that rule. As you can see on the side here, Greg still works for us as an expedition leader. He comes on board as a leader about 2 to 3 times every time a year. And actually that sailing that Jamie mentioned, where it was 16 days without a polar bear, I believe that was Greg leading that sailing as well. So he's great if you can get him on board leading your expedition. That amazing bit of history that comes with him himself. But no matter who your expedition leader is, you'll get this amazing sense of wonder and exploration when you travel. As Will mentioned as well, we are a sustainable and ethical travel company. We are B Corp certified, and we are the only cruise line in the world to have this certification. Many of you may have seen B Corp certification on some products that you use regularly. Things like Pucker Teas, which is another British sustainable company, have this, as well as Tony's Chocolonely and other companies as well. B Corp certification is a 3-year process. It is a NGO that operates, that goes through everything a business does, whether this is your emissions, how you work with your staff, your ownership, to basically give you this certification to say you are sustainable and ethical in everything you do. Now, for us at AE Expeditions, we are carbon neutral. We do not have single-use plastic on board our ships, but it also transpires to different aspects as well. The thing that always impresses me most is that when we're traveling in the polar regions, we have a sustainable food program. So when we're in the Arctic, our meat all comes from a farmer in Denmark and our fruit is all coming from France. So we are having food that is coming from local areas and is seasonable as well. So we're not shipping food around the world. We are working with individual farmers. We know them all personally. Our team from head office go and visit them every year, and we have a long-term partnership that we work with them. So for us, sustainability is not a buzzword. We weave this into the fabric of everything that we do when we're on board. The difference when traveling with AE Expeditions, we have purpose-built ships that are designed for the polar regions, which I will touch on shortly. Because of these purpose-built small ships, we allow more time off the ships. So when traveling with us, our ships hold a maximum of 130 passengers on board. This is really important because it means that we can prioritize getting you off the ship and into the destination. Every time there is an opportunity to go for a landing, to go for a hike and explore the ground, or whether it's going out on a Zodiac, every single passenger will get that opportunity to leave. Sometimes if it's a larger ship, you may have to rotate and go in different rows, or you may go for just 50 minutes at a time. But with AE expeditions, for us, it's destination first and ship comes second. So if we can get out on a Zodiac, we'll be out for 2 hours. If we've got an opportunity to hike for 3-4 hours, we will do. And we offer 2 opportunities a day, if not 3, to be able to go and explore the destination. As I mentioned, we're all about positive impact travel and strong on education and enrichment. This includes our citizen science programs, things where you can get involved yourself and look at science surveys that will happen with NGOs, universities, large organizations such as NASA to help gain some amazing scientific data for their research programs. As Jamie mentioned, we are going right to the edge of the world, so it's great to be able to help those opportunities for those organizations. My personal favorite being the Happy Whale program, where if you can take the fluke image of a tail of a whale, you can send that directly to Happy Whale Project, and they'll reply to you and say, that's George, 6 months ago, he was swimming around Tenerife, the Canary Islands. And I've double checked this, there are 2 Georges that they're studying. So, hey, if Happy George is on his way between Svalbard, that's great for us. We do also have an amazing activity program, which I'll touch on as well, an amazing expert guide such as Jamie when you're on board your sailing. So our expedition team is going to include a wide variety of people on board. This including our photographers, naturalists, there's historians, there's glaciologists, whale experts, ornithologists, and they really do bring to life what you're going to see and do and experience when traveling in those destinations. I remember having a few days where I was in Zodiac with a geologist on board, and I never knew how fascinating limestone could be. So they really do bring these destinations to life and get you really excited about everything that you're seeing and doing. When traveling with us, so what you can expect on an average day. So as I mentioned, there'll be 2 opportunities a day to be able to leave the ship, weather pending. So we maybe head out on a Zodiac cruise. A usual day, the alarm may go off at 7 a.m., have a nice relaxed breakfast, and by about 9 a.m. we'll be out on that Zodiac. We'll probably head to somewhere like Jamie was saying, like Archipelago, and go and see those amazing brunette guillemots, going out there for a couple of hours. Come back on the ship for a bit of lunch, and then we'll head out on a hike. As I say, these can be anything between 1 and 3 to 4 hours, depending on the terrain, your fitness, and what you'd like to see and do. But we do weave in multiple things as we're going along. So, of course, it's a gem of locations for photography. There's always fascinating historical sites. In Svalbard, you'll get a great opportunity to explore Longyearbyen when you're at the start and at the end of your sailing, but also we'll head maybe far out east into Kvitøya. Kvitøya is a beautiful glacial island. There are no historic sites of anything left behind, but it is a pivotal location for the André hot air balloon expedition of 1896. So it's amazing to be able to link up those locations based on what you're seeing and doing. And of course, if we're heading Kvitøya and we're going to go and talk about the André expedition, then that's what we'll maybe have a lecture on in the evening. We'll come back on board the ship, grab yourself a drink, and sit in the lecture theatre for half an hour or an hour, and we'll talk about that lecture and what we're seeing and doing. Amazing citizen science programs, as I mentioned, and that opportunity for bird watching. Now, I'm someone who's always been fascinated with seeing the marine life. Bird watching was something that was never high up on my focus, but since joining AE expeditions and coming to Svalbard and to Greenland and Antarctica, I have become an avid bird watcher, and it's just magical seeing these bird colonies. You think going to the polar regions that these are deserts, these are uninhabitable regions, and yet the wide variety of animal life that is there is absolutely spectacular. And bird watching, no matter where you travel with us, is always going to be fantastic. Of course, in the bottom left-hand corner, I can't get away from the polar plunge. There is always that opportunity for you to join a polar plunge on every sailing. This is not compulsory. However, I do strongly recommend it for that amazing bit of dopamine. You can jump off the side of the ship into that icy water and really have an amazing experience to get the dopamine running. But of course, if you aren't wanting to do this, stand on the side of the ship and cheer the rest of those people on. Something that makes us unique at AE Expeditions is that we have our amazing optional activity programs. Now, in the Arctic, this is limited towards the kayaking. As Jamie mentioned, it's the polar bears. They are in the water, they are on the land, and they are generally faster than us in both locations. So we are limited when we're in Svalbard. But if you are thinking of traveling with us in other regions as well, we have things such as snorkeling and scuba diving in the polar regions, skiing and snowboarding, camping, and as well as alpine trekking and overnight hikes as well. Some of these are completely accessible for everybody. So if you are able to just lie on your back and have a good night's sleep, then perfect. Camping is the destination for you. If you are a swimmer, you can join the snorkeling program with no prior snorkeling experience. And same as well, if you want to do the snowshoeing, if you're able to do a nice little hike, you can join the snowshoeing. Other things, ski and snowboarding, if you are a black level skier, you can join the program. But if you are very much Bambi, like I am on ice, then skiing is not the right thing for you with us. And same for the scuba diving program, you need to be a dry suit, cold water certified scuba diver. But there is that flexibility, and it's a great way just to add on an additional experience into your sailing. These opportunities, as I say, things like the kayaking, the snorkeling, we will be able to do those twice a day, every day, weather permitting as well. So very, very immersive and a fantastic way to get at one with the nature away from the ship. In terms of our ships, so we do have two, soon to be three ships in our fleet. We have the Greg Mortimer at the top, named after our founder, the Sylvia Earle in the middle, which has joined us in 2022, named after the American oceanographer, and the third ship joining us in December this year is the Douglas Mawson, named after the Australian expeditioner from the Victorian era. However, Douglas Mawson was born in Yorkshire, and as a Yorkshireman myself, I'd like to claim him as our Yorkshire ship. So there is those options between them. The three ships are sister ships to one another, and they are the Ulstein X-Bow series. I always think our ships look like something out of Thunderbirds or Stingray with those upside down bows. Those upside down bows are amazingly designed for working in the polar regions. So with those, they're able to break through the ice, and then they also slice the water apart as well. So if you're in rough seas, it creates a much smoother experience when sailing between them. Something that I think is really, really important when going to these remote regions to create the smoothest ride possible. As I mentioned, they are holding 130 passengers maximum in them. So you've got a great amount of space there to be able to relax, have some privacy, but also to be able to mix in with the other passengers on board as well. The ships are 95% identical towards another as well. So it doesn't matter the date of the sailing, whether it's the Greg, the Sylvia, or the Dougie, all of them offer the same amazing experience, and it just needs to be the right dates for you. On board, you have everything that you need for a successful expedition. So we have our citizen science centers. So if you are joining those citizen science programs where you're collecting phytoplankton or seabird studies, we can go into the science center to record those research that we're doing. Amazing lecture theatre. So as I say, every day we'll have that pre-cap or recap of what we've seen and done, plus amazing lectures from our expedition team. These can be on subjects such as polar bears, ice flows, climate change. They can be on the history of the expedition era in Svalbard, but a beautiful spot for you to be able to relax and enjoy learning on board the ship. We do also have a purpose-built mudroom aboard the ship. So each of those lockers is for each cabin. So you'll have your own set mud boots. You'll also have space for your expedition jacket, which is a complimentary 3-in-1 puffer coat and windproof, waterproof coat that is yours to take home, as well as your life jacket. So they're yours and they're kept throughout the journey. The coats you get to take home with them as well. And it does mean that you don't need to take any of your outside gear into your cabin as well. So it gives that great separation. The mudroom is also on deck 3, and so when you're stepping out into those zodiacs, it is just one step down from the ship into the zodiac, so really easy and accessible when traveling. As well as those essential gears that we need for the expedition, another essential aspect is our bar, onboard bar, of course, which is perfect for the evening to be able to relax with a beer after you've done that amazing exploration for the polar bears and guillemots. And onboard dining as well. So each ship has a main dining room as well as specialty restaurants. The main dining room will be open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Breakfast and lunch is a buffet service, and in the evening is an a la carte menu. There is no set dining. If you'd like to be on a table of 2, just you and your partner, and just have it nice and quiet evening, you can do so. But I will say that on the majority of sailings, those tables of 6, 8, and 10 fill up first because people are very much wanting to mix with the other expeditioners and talk about what they've seen in their day. And so finer things as well. My personal favorite spot is the jacuzzis, which are located at the stern of the ship. After dinner, a glass of wine with those in those jacuzzis where you see the icebergs and in that lovely evening sun is just the best place to relax. We do also have onboard saunas as well. I feel this is important to share. We were talking about a lot of ice sculptures, a lot of ice features and cold destinations. So an amazing way to warm up in an afternoon and evening after you've been out for a couple of hours. And in terms of your cabins, the vast majority of our cabins are the balcony staterooms, as you can see here. They include king or twin beds, nice sofa for relaxing, 42-inch square TVs, which are loaded with movies and TVs. So if you do want a relaxing movie night, but also they have live streaming into the lecture theatre as well. So again, if you want to see that lecture, but just have a bit of peace and quiet, then you can do so from your cabin as well. My personal favorite feature for the cabins is that they have underfloor heating in the bathrooms. So in the morning, you can wake up, go for breakfast, and leave your thermal gear on the floor of the bathroom. So when you head out for that Zodiac, your long johns are going to be nice and cozy, ready for you to go. We do also offer suites available, which have separate living rooms and bedrooms as well. And those cabins can always be interconnected as well. So if you are traveling as a family or a group of friends, you can interconnect between you. And actually, as well, you can also have the balconies interconnecting as well if you want the cabins next to one another. So you can have your own private cabin, but a much larger balcony to be able to share those fantastic wildlife viewings. In terms of our destinations, so of course Svalbard is the key for us tonight, but in the Arctic region we do operate across Norway, Svalbard and Jan Mayen, Greenland, east and west, as well as the Canadian Northwest Passage and Iceland. In the winter months, ships head to the southern hemisphere and go to the Antarctic Peninsula and Weddell Sea. We do South Georgia and the Falkland Islands, and we also have sailings to the Ross Sea and East Antarctica as well, which is traveling from Australia and New Zealand. We've talked a lot about ice features, so if you do want somewhere that's maybe a little bit warmer, our hot destinations include Scotland, less ice there, Australia and Tasmania, Costa Rica and the Panama Canal, Raja Ampat in Indonesia, and Patagonia as well. So when traveling with AE Expeditions, please do think of us for Svalbard, but I can tell from a lot of our regular clients that you do want to come back again and again. The expedition bug is something that is very much true, and if you've done one expedition, you will most likely be wanting to come back for a second or a third, so we have that variety for you. When looking at Svalbard, as Will was mentioning, you can have a couple of different options. So you can do Svalbard on its own and go through the archipelago. These sailings start at 8 days, where you'll be touching on the main island of Svalbard in the west of the archipelago, and they go as long as 15 days, which offers a likelihood of a circumnavigation or much deeper exploration across all of the archipelago as well. With Svalbard, it is the best destination in the Arctic for wildlife, and as Jamie was mentioning, it would be a fantastic combination between the marine life, the bird life, and as well as things such as the reindeer, Arctic foxes, and the polar bears as well. So if you are looking to go for a wildlife safari on ice, then doing Svalbard on its own is an amazing opportunity to get that opportunity through. However, if you are wanting to have a bit of a combination of what the Arctic can offer in full, then another one of our core destinations is our combination sailing, the Jewels of the Arctic, which includes Svalbard, East Greenland, and Iceland. I think this is a fantastic option if you want to try a little bit of everything the Arctic can offer us. So as we mentioned before with Svalbard being that strong wildlife destination, heading to East Greenland to its amazing fjord system, beautiful mountain ranges, and amazing ice features as well. Heading into Scoresby Sund, which is the largest fjord system in the world, as well as stopping by Itok or Tumit, which is the most remote settlement in the Western Hemisphere, to go and see a local Inuit community. And then finishing down in Iceland, where we head to places like Isafjordur, which is amazing for the whales in the summer season as well. Hopefully that gives you a good idea on a little bit about what we can offer in the Arctic regions of AE Expeditions. And I will go back to, well.
Andy, thank you so much. That was really comprehensive, and wow, those ships are absolutely amazing, don't they? Thank you both very much, Jamie and Andy, for those talks. I hope everyone found them as informative as I did, and inspiring too. I'm sure many of you have got questions, so please do use the chat button on your screen to ask any questions that you like. And I'd like to welcome back now to join Andy and Jamie, Jo from Discover the World, one of their polar travel specialists, to start our Q&A session. There's Jo. Hi, Jo. We've got Jamie back, and there's Andy. Thanks, guys. Perhaps, Jo, I could kick things off with you just by asking you if you could pick your most memorable moment of voyaging in Svalbard. What springs to mind?
Yeah, so I've been lucky to travel over to Spitsbergen a couple of times, but the original time I think was nearly 20 years ago now, so very long time ago. But we were very lucky to have quite a close encounter with a polar bear. But it was basically on the beach, and then there were walruses just all around it. And the polar bear was just lying there, just minding its own business, and the walruses were just lying around, and neither interacted with each other. They were just all seemed very, very relaxed. Obviously, we couldn't do a landing, but yeah, that was probably the most memorable, because that was my first trip there as well to see it. So that was pretty special.
Incredible. Andy, what about, sorry, no, Jamie, let's go to you next. Can you possibly pick out one standout moment from all the trips you've done?
It's quite hard. I remember the very first time I went, returning to Longyearbyen, sailing up East Fjord, and it'd been a very full trip. You know, every day there had been something extraordinary, and it was quite a nice evening. And I was out on deck, and a pod of about 30 or 40 beluga approached the ship, and they're funny because they're all white. So most cetaceans, an awful lot of wildlife in general, is what they have counter shading, so a black back and a white belly. And that's to help avoid predators, basically, or to make it harder for your prey to see you. But the beluga's all white. So what's strange about it is that when you're looking down from the ship, you can see them coming from an awful long way, because you can see that white emerging from the dark of the ocean. So it was really special to see them look like kind of like ghosts coming up from the depths. I've never seen another beluga since. So it felt all the more special, I guess.
That sounds amazing. Andy, how about you? Can you pick a moment?
It's what's behind me on the screen. So it's going to Alkefella for the first time. And as Jamie was saying, about 100,000 brunette guillemots. And we were there right at the end of the season, where the mothers start flying off and the babies are about to leave the nest for the first time. And at the moment that the babies are leaving the nest, they are not ready to fly yet, but they need to go before the winter hits in. So the mothers actually kind of just throw the babies off the cliff, and they start dive bombing into the water. The mothers will fly south, and then the fathers will stay with the babies and swim south for about a month before their wings are ready to go. So to be surrounded by 100,000 guillemots, the sounds, the smells, the aura, and them just falling and flying all around you is just magical.
It is that sort of multi-sensory experience, isn't it? I mean, I'll chip in my favorite moment, and coming back to you, Jamie, on you seeing that pod of beluga whales. My most memorable experience up in Spitsbergen was actually hearing belugas. I was on a sailing schooner which had a metal hull, and we were sailing into Magdalena Fjord up in the north west tip of Spitsbergen. It was a beautiful day, totally calm, under sail, no engine sound, and down below decks you could hear the song of the beluga whale echoing through the hull of the ship. We didn't actually see them, but apparently the sound of these canary whales, they call them, don't they? Canaries of the sea, can travel for miles, and you could actually hear their song pulsing through the hull. It was quite fantastic. Wow, you never forget moments like that, Jo. So with all the choice available, Jo, and all the amazing ships, the different places you can go to, the itineraries and so on, what's the starting point? Where do you begin when planning a polar voyage?
Speak to me.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very much kind of comes down to, I guess, duration, like how long people have got to travel. If people can do the around Spitsbergen, it's definitely worth being out there for as long as possible. And I think also, like talking with all the talks and things, the scenery is quite often overlooked. Like people are more focused on, I've got to see a polar bear, or I've got to see this. And actually, I found the walruses were more interesting than the polar bears. They were doing more. The polar bear was just sitting there, but the walruses were, kind of doing more things. So yeah, it's basically kind of comes down to kind of duration and trying to go for as long as you can. Looking at the different ship options if they want to have a smaller ship. I mean, these ships are amazing, and you don't really get rough crossings or rough seas or anything in Spitsbergen itself. But I have to say, these new ships, it was the most smoothest sailing I've ever been on. I just did a very short trip on one fairly recently, and I didn't even realize we were moving. It was so smooth. So I can imagine things like kind of the Denmark Strait between Greenland and Spitsbergen or Antarctica, it would just be very smooth sailing. So people, you know, if they have issues with kind of being at sea or, you know, get seasickness, these ships, you know, are definitely one of the most amazing ones to kind of be on. But yeah, there's a lot of factors that we take into consideration when we are recommending it, whether they want to do kayaking, you know, other excursions, if they want balconies, because these ships mostly have balconies, and having a balcony, I have to say, was a game changer for me as well. It makes a real difference, because some of the ships just have a very tiny porthole or a very small window, and having a balcony and being able to open that window up, or having even just the curtains open, just does make a big difference. So yeah, we have a really good selection, but these new ships definitely are a game changer. They're amazing.
Brilliant, thanks, Jo. Yeah, and also the sauna and the hot tubs. Wow,
Yeah, definitely added bonus.
Pretty impressive. Andy, you really covered the daily life on board really well in your talk, I thought. But it just occurred to me, you know, in the summer you've got 24-hour daylight. If, for example, I don't know, the captain or whoever's on watch saw a pod of 40 beluga like Jamie did, will he wake everyone up and get everyone else on deck at 4 o'clock in the morning, or is it very much diurnal still, even though it's 24-hour daylight?
No, definitely. If there is some amazing wildlife viewing happening at midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, we will let you know. As we were saying at the start, you know, it's destination first, ship second. So if there is that pod of beluga, if we are sailing past the coast and there's a mother polar bear with its cubs, then we will put the tannoy and say, sorry for disturbing you, but you may want to see this. And that's exactly where it comes into play again with having the balcony, because it's quite easy to be able to jump out onto the balcony and see it straight away without having to get all your gear back on and going up to the top deck. So definitely, if there's some great wildlife viewing, we will wake you up at 2, 3 in the morning for it.
Brilliant. Just got to hope that the whales swim all the way around the ship, so everyone on port and starboard side gets a sighting. Otherwise there'll be a mutiny at breakfast. Jamie, we've mentioned a little bit about timing. Obviously summer is when the pack ice is released from the shoreline of Spitsbergen, and these summer voyages can take place. Can you give us a bit more specific information on the best time to visit Svalbard, and maybe some of the wildlife cues? I mean, when did the seabirds arrive and leave and so on?
Yeah, I mean the season is quite short in Svalbard, because actually the latitudes are so extreme that the ships can only really be there for about, I think it's like 2.5 months through the summer. So everything's happening over that period. So it's sort of, not only is the you know, waterways navigable, but also the wildlife is at the peak of its breeding. Pretty much everything is happening then. It's in both polar regions. All these animals are forced to have pretty extreme adaptations. So they need to have young that they can feed up very quickly, get as large as possible, as quickly as possible, before winter starts to creep back in, which that far north is sort of in late September, early October already. You'd be getting into you would start to see sea ice forming and everything. So yeah, I mean, really, the times that we would be up there operating, you've got a chance of seeing everything. It's not, I mean, again, don't want to keep using Antarctica as a comparison, but Antarctica is a bit more of a longer season, and a bit more, you know, you see the newborn chicks here, and then you see the whales arriving here, and then things start to leave again. Svalbard's a lot further north than you can sail south. So you tend to get up there, and everything's sort of happening concurrently, which is great. A lot of it's opportunistic as well. You know, well-organized ships will have ornithologists, as well as the bridge, constantly looking out for wildlife as we sail along. I'm terrible at it, it turns out. I'm really quite good at taking pictures of animals, but people have to point them out to me first. And then after that, I'm fine, but I'm not very good at spotting. I've never been the first one to spot a polar bear ever. Yeah,
it's really remarkable just how much is there and all drawn there by this short season. And some of the species numbers are increasing as things have got a little bit warmer as well. So there's more diversity there now, and yeah, it's really, there are other parts of the Arctic, for example, the Canadian high Arctic. The scenery there is absolutely sensational, some of the best in the world, really, and same with East Greenland. But the wildlife really thins out a lot because, as well as the polar bears, there you've got indigenous people, and in Svalbard, there's no indigenous people. There never were people there until European explorers got up there in the first place. So that means that the wildlife is just a lot more concentrated and a lot. I guess one of the phrases that gets used sometimes is a bit more naive. So it's a lot easier to spot in Svalbard than it is in other parts of the Arctic.
And what about the wildflowers? Does the tundra flower in that brief period as well in the summer?
It does, yeah. I mean, there's a few flowers in Svalbard. I would say that for those sort of miniature forests, which are quite famous in the Arctic, East Greenland's even better than Svalbard for that. But yeah, in Svalbard you get different types of mushroom in some places as well. So if you go any time from July, August, you'll see that very truncated. It's a period of abundance for wildlife and for the plants as well, because there's just such a short period before the really harsh winter starts creeping back in.
Thanks, Jamie. That's great. So just the months, I guess, we're talking about, are we talking about June,
July, August, yeah. And then I think
July.
there are a couple of trips in September, but by then it's already it's a double thing, because the ships need to then start making their way all the way down to Antarctica, but also the conditions get less reliable. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jamie. Jo, can I come to you next? We've got a question in about solo travel. Can I have my own cabin? And are there additional costs for solo travelers?
Yeah, so there's always an option that if people do want to have their own cabins, then yes, absolutely fine. There are supplements sometimes, but I think Aurora have like a special offer on at the moment for solos. But if you are willing to share, then you can be matched up. So you can literally just pay the twin share price, and then you're basically guaranteed to have a twin share. Even if you don't if you're lucky enough, you don't actually have somebody sharing your cabin, you get it. You don't have to pay anything extra. But yeah, so there's definitely both options if they want to do that, no problem.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jo. Andy, going back to seasons, we've got a question in on, we might need your crystal ball for this one, actually. When do you think the earliest date will be this summer when a circumnavigation of Svalbard, Spitsbergen can happen? Impossible to say, I guess, is it?
It is, because it's at this time it's too early to say when the spring will hit and whether it's going to be an early or a late sort of spring going. I'd say that circumnavigations are always better to look at around the second half of July and into August, because it is, say, it's that pack ice in the northern part of Spitsbergen and Svalbard which hinders you. So it is that hard one with a crystal ball. But if you want to do a circumnavigation, I always say, like, look at towards the second half of the season. So second half of July and August is when you've got your best chance of doing so.
When the pack ice does allow you to do circumnavigation, does that allow you access into more densely populated areas for polar bears, or are they just distributed evenly across the whole?
Just again, it's that joy of the safari on ice. So it can be very, very different depending on where you are and where you see them. The last time I was in Svalbard, I was in late August. It was a time when you would expect there to be less polar bears, but we had some fantastic viewings because there was a lot of younger polar bears who kept staying onto the archipelago, do more feeding before heading up to go into that pack ice. So you will get to see them in the pack ice as well as on the archipelago, but they are very, very elusive and very good at being camouflaged and hiding. So the polar bears are definitely the one you can never tell whether you're going to get a lot or not many on any sailing. I think it's easier to predict with the bird life, the whale and the marine life, what you're going to see. Polar bears are elusive at any time of year.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. That's great. Jamie, can I come to you, inspired by your photographs earlier? We've had a few questions on photography, not surprisingly. So if you're keen, well, first of all, let's start by saying, do you need to be an enthusiastic or a proficient photographer to get the most out of these trips, or would a beginner be able to get some good shots too.
Oh, I mean, it's so pretty that yeah, it's definitely user error if you can't get a decent photo when you're up there, and it doesn't matter if if one thing that I think I get asked a lot when I'm working as a photo guide is about taking wildlife photos with smartphones. So that's really hard because smartphones are designed for taking pictures of people and pets. But what your phone can be really good for is, first of all, video of flying birds, like for example at Alcafjell, when you've got hundreds of thousands of birds above your head. Video is often a really nice way to capture that, but they're particularly good for taking landscape pictures as well. So yeah, you can get an awful lot out of your phone these days, but if a polar bear is 500 meters away, you're not going to be able to take a picture of its eye with your smartphone. So that's something you have to just try to be realistic about. But part of the job of the photo guide on the ships is to try and improve everyone's photograph. So normally, if I'm in that role, what I'll be doing is a photo lecture really early on to try and teach everyone how best to take photos in this particular environment, and just reminding them of things like it's a cold weather environment. That means your batteries will drain quicker as well. And then just try, when we're in the field, also teaching people a little bit more about what they could be doing to improve their photos as they go. But with the wildlife being so abundant and with the scenery being so spectacular, you can come away believing that you're actually a better photographer than you really are, But that's great. The people at home don't need to know that.
And what about if you're a complete beginner? We've had someone saying, I know very little about photography. Could you give me a very basic idea of the spec or a reasonable camera? I mean, you don't want to sort of get bogged down in too much.
Yeah, I mean,
what sort of general kit would you recommend?
So, I mean, it depends what you're hoping to achieve, right? I mean, a lot of people fret about having all the best gear, but to be honest, I take pictures at very high resolution because either I'm going to crop them massively to show details of wildlife, or I'm going to try and sell them to an editor, so they need to be large so that they look good in print. A lot of people are only going to share their pictures on social media, so you don't actually need an insanely large or expensive camera. What you do need, I would say, for a lot of good wildlife photography is a decent zoom lens, and you can't really cheat that after a while. One thing you can do sometimes is if you have like a stationary object, something like a polar bear that's sleeping, you can use your smartphone with a telescope and cheat a little bit, but generally you'll ultimately need to invest in a zoom lens if you're hoping to take really good wildlife pictures.
Thanks, Jamie. That's great. Andy, if I come to you next about those citizen science projects. I love the Happy Whale one. That sounds such a good scheme. Tell us a bit more about the other things that you can do on the citizen science project.
So in Svalbard, there's ones we do globally. There's some that are certain location specific, but in Svalbard, there will also be phytoplankton surveys. So that is taking samples of the water and actually dropping discs into the water to seeing how low it goes before it becomes invisible in the water, and that's looking at the plankton levels in the water. So looking at the plankton levels gives us an idea on things like climate change, weather patterns, whether a summer is early or late. And plankton are very much a huge part of the biodiversity, so it gives a great idea on the strength of the biodiversity of a region. We do also participate in seabird surveys, so these are great opportunities if we're doing sailing between two locations, or if we have got a sea day where we'd go out on the top deck, and for about half an hour or an hour we will be recording how many birds and what variety, what species they are when we're traveling, and this go to global databases. And we do also do things such as pollution, beach pickups and litter pickups on beaches. And Jamie was mentioning earlier about the fact that Svalbard never had any native population. It was always just when the European settlers came in the late 1800s. But I've done beach cleanups in an area that has never had human population, and you'd be surprised by the amount of litter that comes through the oceans. So we do take part in that as well, which clients have got the opportunity to. So it's a great variety depending on what clients' interests are. And they just need to say, I want to take part in this. Some are done on the ship, some are done on the Zodiac, some are done on land. So there's that great flexibility, lasts for a few hours each at a time.
That sounds brilliant. I can imagine those citizen science projects being really appealing to older children. Jo, is this a family-friendly option, polar voyage to Spitsbergen?
There is an age limit. So normally most ships will be kind of around kind of 12 years old and older. It's not really that suitable for really, really young children. There's no kind of children's facilities as such, and it needs to be, you know, especially if you're looking for wildlife. So kind of with the polar bears, you know, sometimes you have to be very quiet on the zodiacs to kind of, you know, don't disturb the wildlife and don't scare it away. So yeah, they're not for young families, but definitely for children that are interested in, you know, wildlife and everything like that. Then yeah, the older children definitely. I've travelled on one. All the voyages that I've kind of been on, there's generally not been any really young children, but we had a little boy who was about 14, and he, you know, absolutely loved it. So some of the ships will have like different age ranges, but yeah, on average, we'd probably say minimum kind of 12 years old and upwards.
Be a lucky thing for a major to do, huh?
Yeah.
With you still, Jo, we talked obviously, or we focused mainly on the voyaging side of things, but Jamie also touched on the fact that Spitsbergen is a land-based destination as well. Just tell us a little bit about the opportunities for visiting Longyearbyen during summer and winter, actually.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a couple of different options that clients can do. So with the winter time, it's generally 24 hours of darkness. So very, very extreme to what you would see in the summertime, literally pitch black. But then you've got the opportunities for the Northern Lights 24/7. So that's obviously one of the big draws. There are only a couple of hotels actually in Longyearbyen itself. It's a very, very small town, probably takes about 20 minutes to walk from one end to the other. You can't go outside of the limits, just in case there are polar bears wandering around. Generally not in the winter, but they are around. So yes, we do kind of all the winter activities, kind of snowboarding, snowmobiling, dog sledding. They have these amazing snowcat trips out there. And in the summertime, then you can do kind of just a day trip on a boat. So it's generally to see kind of glaciers, but it has got some of the opportunities are then to maybe see like walruses and some puffins. But if you want to see polar bears, then the only way to do it is on the voyage. They generally are not seen around those areas. So you always have to do like the longer voyages. But yeah, the land-based trips, you know, there's lots and lots of activities that people can do. So if they do want to do it as a land-based, that's definitely another opportunity. But yeah, if it's more they want to see polar bears and it's lots and lots of wildlife, then the main way is to do it by the ship.
Yeah. Yes, I've been to being in the polar night, and it's a very different experience to visiting Svalbard in the summer. I remember my hotel had a clock in reception which was counting down the days, hours, minutes, and seconds when the sun would first pop up over the horizon and go back down again. But yeah, an amazing experience nonetheless. Just very, very different to summer. We're getting to the end of our evening. There's just a few more questions I'm gonna rattle through with you, if you don't mind. We've talked about how many people are on board the ships. Andy, it was about 130, did you say?
130 maximum capacity, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. We've got another question. How do you get to Svalbard? Maybe Jo, you could touch on that. I know, Jamie, you covered that as well. A bit more about the flights via Tromsø and Oslo.
Yeah, so generally SAS, Scandinavian Airlines, or also Norwegian as well. The general same, if it's a same day connection, usually then we do SAS. So kind of Heathrow. There are options for Manchester as well, but yeah, generally then, well, there's no direct flights whatsoever, so you always have to go via somewhere. With the voyages, sometimes you have an overnight included in Oslo, sometimes in Longyearbyen, and then we would work out those flights for you. So we do all the arrangements, so we do all the flights, any extra hotel nights that you need as well. So if the flights don't connect in one day, because we have to look at the schedules and see if they work. So yeah, we work all of that out for people. But yeah, those are the main options for flights. There are a couple of other options as well, like kind of Amsterdam, KLM, things like that. But yeah.
Right, so you can take care of everything and put the whole package together. Fantastic. Yeah. Solar eclipse 2026. Am I right in thinking that's going to be visible East Greenland? Is that right, Jamie, Andy? Which one of you knows about that?
Yeah, it's sort of it's heading out that way. Yeah, it won't. I don't believe it goes anywhere near Svalbard specifically, but yeah, it's clipping. I mean, it depends. The funny thing about the eclipse is that one of the most spectacular experiences you can enjoy. You know, I was very lucky to have seen one like very clearly in Chile a few years ago, but it can get ruined by something as boring as cloud cover. So it's you know, you got this fantastic celestial event, and then it's just a bit cloudy, and you don't get half the experience. But yeah, it is going to be, it's sort of going, so I think it starts even in northern Spain, and then is looping around a lot of Western Europe, and then heads up towards the Arctic. So yeah, if it worked out, it would be absolutely sensational.
Is that a voyage, Andy, that AE are doing?
That, yes, that's correct. So the itinerary that I mentioned at the end, the Jewels of the Arctic, which is the great combination with Svalbard, East Greenland, and Iceland, we do have a sailing for the solar eclipse, and we have secured the permits with the Greenlandic authorities to be heading into the Scoresby Sund, so the largest fjord in the world, which is in the path of totality. So we have that prime spot. As Jamie said, the only thing that stops us is going to be if there's clouds on the day, but we're going there and we're excited to hopefully see the totality.
Fantastic. Wouldn't that be amazing? Jamie, is there anything that you haven't seen yet in Svalbard that you're desperate to see? Some wildlife spectacle, some natural phenomenon that is on your wish list?
I've not seen a polar bear hunting. I have not seen snowy owl, actually. I would quite like to see one. And I've never seen an ermine, which would be pretty hard to do. But yeah, no, those are the things. I'd love to see beluga again as well, because finally, that first time in 2018 is the only time that I've seen them. Other people, you know, will go once and see them on multiple days. It's just a sort of depends on your luck, you know. But yeah, that would all be any of the above would be great.
Wow, fantastic that you still got things that you can have on your wish list after all the times you've been there. That's brilliant. Last question to you, Andy. You mentioned about the X-bow technology and other sustainable features on the ships that AE Expeditions run. What's next? What's the future of sustainable voyaging up in the Arctic?
I think it's something that's not exclusive to us, but something that's been developed is looking at new fuels, new technology. The joy of our ships is that, yes, they are traditional fuel-burning ships, but they are configured so that when we have the equivalent of SAF and clean, modern new fuels, they can convert without having to change the engines, which is great. But there are other operators in the region that are looking at developing solar paneled ships and everything as well, which I think is just the next level. The joy of doing the polar regions is that we are very protective of them and looking in the right way of sustainability as it is, but there's always more to be done, and I'm excited to see where it's going.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Well, thank you. I'm afraid our time is almost up. Thank you for your excellent questions. If after tonight you think of anything else that you forgot to ask or wish you'd asked, please do contact Jo or any of the Discover the World polar travel specialists. They'll be following up with an email after this webinar to cover all the things we've covered and any other information that you might find useful. So I do hope you found the evening interesting and a help for planning your Arctic expedition voyage, whether you're looking at booking something for this summer, if you're quick, or looking ahead to a voyage in 2026. Never too soon to look at those sort of dates. As a thank you for joining us this evening, we're delighted to offer you an exclusive booking incentive of $100 per person onboard credit. That's valid for a month from today to organise. And for 2025 voyages in the Arctic, there's up to 20% off some selected departures with AE Expeditions, £1,500 air credit per person or complimentary upgrades on some voyages, as well as no solo supplement. And then for 2026 voyages, you can save up to 25% at the moment on select departures, and there are also some cabins available with no solo supplement. All these offers can be found on Discover the World's website. We can also find lots more about planning your Arctic expedition adventure. So the best way forward after that is to give Jo or one of the other travel specialists a call, maybe arrange a video call, or pop down to the offices, Discover the World offices in Dorking in Surrey. There's nothing better, is there, than sitting down with someone who's actually been there, poring over a map, enjoying a cup of coffee and just chatting about it. So if you can do a face-to-face meeting, that would be great. These are seriously special trips, aren't they? And you really want to get them right. So a huge thank you to Jo, Jamie and Andy, and a special thank you to you too for joining us this evening. Happy travels, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Good night.